Yeah, there was a line someone said of Hacker News the other day that it's like cryptocurrencies are one by one discovering all the reasons for central currencies to exist. Like they're just slowly rediscovering, slowly and painfully, why finance and money works the way that it does. Uh, so,
Yeah.
but I feel like tech is kind of like that. Like there's this sort of techno utopian ideal of like, oh, we're just going to make our own thing and it's going to be great. It's going to be great by default because we made it. But actually, governance is really hard. Like
Yeah.
governance is a problem that humans have been struggling to do for thousands of years, you know, and we've gotten a bit better at it. We've got some newer ideas, but what's the governance model on Facebook or Google or YouTube?
Yeah.
It's essentially feudalism. Like it's you go into the city and here's the YouTube city. And the YouTube city is beautiful. There's all of this content and everything else. But who's in charge? Well, the king is in charge. Who's the king? Well, it's some engineers in Silicon Valley, but
Mm.
they don't really in charge. They don't like the idea of being in charge
Oh,
because
yeah.
they don't like to consider themselves as tyrants, but they are. So, but they kind of then like bless an artificial intelligence to be in charge on their behalf that's
Mm.
flawed in a million ways. So you're like allowed inside the YouTube city, and it's a nice city. But if you ever piss off the king, you know, by saying a naughty word in the first 10 minutes of your video, or whatever it is that the king doesn't like, then you're banned from the city forever. And you have no recourse. There's no one that you can appeal to. You violated the terms of service according to the artificial intelligence. There was someone I watched the other day. There was an article, someone who who makes video games. He like live streams making video games from scratch. Really cool creator, really creative, interesting guy. Someone blackmailed him on YouTube saying, if you don't pay me money, I'm going to get me and some of my mates to all report your videos for violating the terms of service. So he said no. So they violated his videos for reporting terms of service. He appealed to YouTube. The YouTube algorithm like reinstated his videos. They banned his video again. They reinstated it. They reported his video again, and YouTube just left it off. So now one of the videos in the series of videos is gone from YouTube because some people decided to artificially use the tyranny of the of the AI to blackmail somebody that's creating really creative, like interesting stuff. And that's just a thing that just happened last week, right? So this is so there's you. Well, if you don't like it, well, go somewhere else. Okay, we'll go over to Facebook, Facebook land. Great, you know, everything's much better there. In Facebook land where any amount of nudity is banned, despite the fact that nudity is quite acceptable, say in Germany.
Yeah.
But no, Germans aren't allowed to show nude photos of themselves to other Germans on Facebook because of the moral policing by some people in Silicon Valley, right? Because some people in Silicon Valley aren't comfortable with that. So therefore, in Germany. But then do we want the other way around? Do we want the people in Silicon Valley to have no impact? Well, then you look at somewhere like Myanmar with like WhatsApp, where people are using WhatsApp to organize like lynchings of people, and but Facebook had like one person that spoke whatever language they speak. I don't even know what language they speak in Myanmar. They had like one person who was supposed to be regulating or maintaining or keeping an eye on all of this.
Just the whole country.
For the whole country. So like this, you know, there's a word for it. It's like we talk about it as the Wild West for good reason. Like it's a system with weak government, and when there is government, it's tyrannical. It's like we've sort of opened our eyes, and there's this new land that we've discovered, and it's full of trees and butterflies, and we can do anything there. And people have said, well, stuff this, you know, corporate blah blah blah, like civilization. I don't like governments. I'm going to make my own. I'm going to start my own country in this amazing new land.
It'll be easy. It'll be easy.
It'll be so easy. Yeah. So then they do. And they're like, well, there's no infrastructure. So they made their own infrastructure. Well, they've got to pay for the infrastructure somehow. So, well, I mean, Google and Facebook have to pay for the infrastructure somehow. Oh, well, I mean, people like free things. So let's just sell their data because that doesn't feel like an incursion. And we'll make this city. And we don't need governance. Like, we don't need democracy. There's no voting on Google's products for what the next features are. You know, there's no say. But that's okay because it's different this time somehow, right? So you know, it's like silly to even ask the question of where's the part where I vote inside Google or Facebook or Twitter or any of these other tech platforms. The idea of voting isn't a question that we ask, even though we think that we should vote in our physical places because there's a whole history of not voting and that being terrible. Well, now we've invented these new countries on the internet like TikTok, but well, why would I vote there? oh no, like it looks like people are blackmailing other people on YouTube. It looks like the Yelp mafia. People are going to restaurants and saying, "Give me free food, or I'm going to write a bad review for you on Yelp," and just getting away with it, right? Like there's banditry and there's tyranny, and that's that's like what we've got. Well, why don't we have those things in the physical world?
There are bandits and Karens walking around every restaurant. Oh my god, that's the best.
It's a real thing. So, why don't we have banditry in the real world? Because we've got the courts, because we've got all these institutions, and the institutions have been really well designed and like honed over millennia. And like, they're not perfect. They're absolutely not perfect, but they're way better than what we've got on the internet. But because on the internet, we thought we didn't need any of that. Spoilers, we do. And, it's just going to take us another generation or two to realize it or something.
You're right. I mean, you started off by saying that the internet is feudalism, and you're absolutely right. Like, it's actually probably going to be up to us to move on to democracy next.
Right.
At some point.
Yeah, or maybe mob rule for a while. Like, I don't know. Like, do we go straight to democracy? It'd be nice if we do.
Democracy has this real issue of like stupid people still vote, and I don't know how to. I mean, maybe they should. Like, I think that's kind of a slogan to say, like, stupid people vote, but maybe they have a deep wisdom to them that we should also acknowledge. Like, they still use the platform, and so if they're voting for their own interests, which makes sense.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, like I don't know what that would even look like. The whole system. I mean, if you go back and look at the way that monarchy used to see itself, the idea was that the king or queen was bestowed their authority by God, so they're a representative of God, and officially the king or queen, like the monarchy, owned everything. They owned everything, and then they could essentially like let some other people be landowners, but ultimately the king or queen could take their land back if they really wanted to. So then people were nobles if they were landowners. That's what that meant. And then like the peasants, they were peasants and they were poor because they didn't own anything. So you were like renting. Your family could have lived in the same house for 6 generations, but you didn't own that house. The local lord owns the house, and then you have to pay a tithe to the local lord in exchange for being able to.
A monthly subscription.
You have to pay a monthly subscription to be able to use that piece of land. Exactly, right? So the idea of a peasant voting, well, they don't have any authority. Like, sorry, like voting, we don't care what you vote because you're a peasant. Like, we'll just kill you or kick you off the land if we don't like you, So it's not just like vote the way we want or we'll kick you off. It's we're not even interested in asking you the question because then you're just going to get uppity. And that's the situation that we're in tech right now. Voting doesn't make sense on Google Docs because you don't own anything.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason why Google should listen to you. They don't care about you. You're one of 7 billion people. How many billion people on Google Docs? Like, if you kick up a fuss, they'd rather not have you as a customer than have to interact with you at all. Like, that's basically the situation, like, as a human.
It's tough because at the moment, I mean, there's this issue with Sam Harris had this. It was a terrifying to hear podcast about child sex abuse material on social media platforms. Just to take a fun tone, just a fun turn in this video. But essentially, he said that every single platform that has media sharing content has child sex abuse material. Like, there are every time, and so we're trying to get the governments, the real democracy, to step in and start regulating these big companies. But actually, that's really, really difficult. And there are all these issues with like privacy. Like, Facebook can't, an AI currently, I mean, maybe it can now, but when this was recorded a year ago or whatever, an AI couldn't just go in and look at a video and tell what the content was. And so if a video had already been flagged, it could find it again and delete it. But like, essentially there's this big question of like, how much privacy should people have? Should an AI be able to go through and look at all their videos and read their search history, or not? And I mean, our tech overlords also have a lot of really difficult decisions to make.
Yeah, but to me, again, that's. I mean, you can look at the parallels in the physical world. So there's child abuse that happens. Well, I mean, governance is really hard. It's a really hard problem, right? Like, if I was president of America for a day, I don't know what I would do. I don't feel qualified to step into that role. I mean, like, I might have some ideas, but it's almost too hard for one person to govern a country. It's like really hard. But what do we do? Well, we have the court system, for example, that says, hey, we've got the power to compel people to show up in a room, and we have people that we respect that have, there's a complex vetting process involving, going to law school and doing well at law school and blah blah blah. At least in Australia. In the US, judges are voted on, which is really weird. In Australia, judges are ex-lawyers, and then the judges have the power to be able to make rulings, like make decisions, not in general, but about this particular case. And then those rulings can be binding. Like this is the process. It's not a perfect idea, but it's the best we came up with. And and there's different ideas about common law systems and French legal systems and blah blah blah. But there's if you talk to a lawyer, like there's a history of law. Like there's a history of the invention of these concepts and ideas. And we look at tech companies and say, hey, we're in this new land and there's child sexual abuse material going on. And Google says, like, we don't, or Facebook says, we care, but not that much, like, because these are hard questions about how do we want the governance to work in this space? And it's complicated. And right now it's complicated and you have no voice. So some people that have some incentives have all of the voice that there is, all of the power, and they make some set of decisions, and you don't like the decisions they make. Well, what's the other option? Well, leave. No, that doesn't really solve the problem. They could make better choices. I guess we could petition them to make better choices, which is what Sam Harris is doing. We could impose that. I mean, all of the digital atoms of, like, everyone that's on a digital platform is also in a physical country. So we can just compel Facebook using, like, we can kind of like grandfather in democracy to be able to have votes and have lawmakers make decisions in the real world, and then just have them enforce those decisions on Facebook.
I don't know. I mean, maybe that will work as to create an architect a framework, but like in reality, the law takes so long to pass, and computers are very, very quick. Like,
I don't even think that's the biggest problem. I just think that lawmakers of physical worlds and physical space they're not really qualified to make decisions about how virtual spaces should work. They do work differently. There's a whole like, how many American senators use computers regularly the same way that that 20-something people do? Probably none of them, right? So, like, do we, like, I don't know that people that aren't citizens of the digital world should be making decisions on the digital world, but the people that are citizens of the digital world inside the digital world have no voice. They have no authority over that digital space itself. Like, I just think that we need to do something here. I think ideally what I want, if we could manage it, is I'd like a democracy inside the digital world as well, or inside different digital spaces, where people can have a voice, and the voice that they have is expressed through the way that the tools work and everything else. It's like a co-owned type system. And it sounds kind of communist to say it like that, but what I'm looking for is to fight back against the current, to use this terminology and this framing, the current system we have is feudalism. I want to move away from feudalism to something that's a bit more mature and a bit more grown up, where we can say, like, hey, there's a child sexual abuse problem in this platform. Let's, as a community, talk about it, and as a community, brainstorm and vote on what solutions we want. As a community, make the decisions about how our community should be governed. Because, like, at the end of the day, if I'm in community with you, say, like, we're in a community together, I think that we have a fundamental, I think right is the right word. I think we have a right to be able to decide collectively as a group and as a community how our community is governed, within some boundaries. So, there's I'm not religious, but there's a Planet Shakers, which is this sort of young evangelical church just out my window down there. And sometimes I watch them with my binoculars and make sassy comments to my girlfriend about it.
You watch them with binoculars?
Well, it's fascinating. You can kind of see, like, sometimes they're all going into Planet Shakers, and we play the game of, is that a person going to Planet Shakers? Like, do they have that vibe? There's a vibe. But they have a right to decide how their community works and what music's played and whatever else. And because they're part of a broader, larger society, we have coarser rights as a broader society to say that if there was, say, if a church in Australia happened to be have a bunch of sexual abuse going on in its walls, then we as a broader society have the right to be able to say, no, that's not okay. Your society, your community can't work that way. But that's a very coarse tool that we'd like to not use. And then the very specific thing should be very local and like hyper local. Like the community itself decides if they want to be meeting on Saturdays or Sundays. The community itself decides if, you know, anyone can say anything in the Zoom room that they've got, or if people have to raise their hands. You know, the society can decide whether or not they're meeting in person and what their relationship with COVID is going to be up to a point and so on. But we need more of that, I think, in technology, in our digital solutions, where we have some of it, but like I can't change Google Docs' interface. You know, I can't make my own software that interacts with Google Docs. In fact, it's really hard to make any software that is going to work in the collaborative kind of way that Google Docs works. No open source software that I know does that, or does it to that kind of extent. And I want to make that kind of software. Like I want the computers that we have to work that way. And from a technical front, that's entirely possible. Again, because everything we do in computers is all made up, and B, because there's been a bunch of work lately, and again, for people that know my work, in the space of CRDTs, which is this set of technologies that lets us do, it stands for conflict-free replicative data types, replicated data types. But the basic idea is I can open up a document on my computer, I can make some changes. Then at some point, my computer can tell you and your computer about those changes. And you can also be concurrently making changes on your computer. And everything just magically syncs up. It all just works. And we don't need some central computer in the middle that makes all the decisions about how everything works out. Sometimes it's helpful to have a relay server or something, but you know, ultimately the authority of what happens on our respective computers. And both my computer and your computer just have a history of all the changes that were made, and have some algorithms to merge all that in so that we can see a shared view of a document.